Restoration begins when your eyes open to see what God has been doing behind the curtain of your pain. Before God restores, He always reveals. He reveals purpose in the chaos, direction in the confusion, and beauty in the ashes. The first step toward your divine restoration is the realization that your story is not over. Those moments you thought were wasted, they were not wasted, they were woven. Every heartbreak, every detour, every closed door was allowed by God to realign you with His perfect plan. You see, sometimes God must let things fall apart so He can rebuild you stronger, wiser, and purer. The things that left you broken were not signs of His absence but proof of His preparation. When God is ready to restore, He first opens your eyes to understand that what you lost wasn't meant to destroy you, it was meant to develop you. You may have cried over what you thought would last forever. You may have mourned seasons that ended too soon, but God says, before I restore, I must renew your vision. You cannot walk into restoration still seeing yourself as broken. You cannot receive divine recovery while believing you are ruined. The revelation of restoration starts when you shift your focus from what was lost to what God is about to release. You may not see it yet, but God is setting the stage for something so powerful, so supernatural, that it will make sense why you had to go through everything you did. The job that slipped away, the relationship that failed, the opportunity that vanished, none of it was a mistake. God was protecting your destiny, pruning your path, and preparing your spirit for a greater level of glory. When God gives revelation, He awakens your faith. He whispers to your heart, I am not done with you. You start to realize that time is not your enemy, it's God's instrument. What looks like delay is often divine development. God was never withholding from you, He was shaping you. He had to break certain patterns, remove certain people, and close certain doors because they couldn't handle what He's about to do next. The revelation of restoration shifts your perspective from loss to purpose. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start declaring, God, thank you for what you're doing through me. Restoration starts in your mind before it ever happens in your circumstances. When your thinking aligns with heaven, everything else begins to follow. That's why the enemy fights your perception so fiercely. He wants you to believe that what's gone will never return, that the best is behind you, that you've run out of chances. But the devil is a liar. You serve a God who can breathe life into dry bones, who can make rivers flow in deserts, who can restore years that the locusts have eaten. The moment you catch the revelation that it's not over, your atmosphere begins to shift. Heaven begins to move. Don't despise your broken seasons, they were training ground for your restoration. You learned strength in silence. You learned faith when you had nothing to hold on to but God's word. You learned endurance when life didn't go your way. And now you are ready for revelation. You are ready to see that every loss carried a lesson, every delay carried development, and every tear carried transformation. The revelation of restoration is this: God doesn't just give back what you lost, He gives back better, bigger, and blessed beyond measure. So lift your head. You haven't seen your best days yet. What you thought was the end was only an interruption in the story God is still writing. The author of your life never leaves a chapter unfinished. He restores, He renews, and He redeems. Every year you thought was gone is coming back with power. The very thing that broke you will become the thing that builds you. God's revelation is whispering to your soul, right now get ready, because what's coming will make you forget the pain of what you lost. Your restoration begins the moment you realize you were never defeated, only being positioned for greater. Every pain you endured, every silent night you cried, every season where it felt like your prayers went unanswered, none of it was wasted. Your pain was not punishment, it was planting. Every tear you shed watered the soil of your destiny. God never lets pain exist without purpose. What you thought was breaking you was actually building you. Every trial was shaping your character, every disappointment was refining your faith, and every setback was positioning you for a comeback that would silence every doubt. You see, pain is the classroom where purpose is taught. God uses hardship to stretch your capacity, to deepen your dependence, and to prepare you for the promise. If your journey had been easy, you wouldn't have developed the strength to carry the blessing He's about to release. You may not have realized it then, but God was working behind the scenes during your darkest nights. While you were trying to survive, He was planting something eternal within you: endurance, faith, humility, and wisdom. He saw every heartbreak, every betrayal, and every loss. He saw the people who walked away, the opportunities that slipped through your fingers, the moments when you almost gave up. But instead of letting that pain destroy you, He used it to define you. Every painful moment became a seed of purpose buried deep in your soul, waiting for its appointed time to bloom. That's why the word says, "Those who sow in tears shall reap with joy." Your tears were never wasted. They were watering the ground for your future victory. The pain you felt was evidence that God was still working. The very pressure that crushed you was the same pressure that brought forth the oil inside of you. Diamonds are created under pressure, and so are destinies. The seasons that hurt the most are often the seasons that birth the most. You may have felt like you lost years of progress, but what if those years were actually preparation? What if the very thing you resented was the thing that readied you for your calling? God never wastes pain, because pain carries power. It refines, it purifies, it equips. Every season of suffering carries divine instruction lessons that comfort cannot teach. When Joseph was betrayed by his brothers and thrown into a pit, it seemed like his dream had died. But God was using that pit to lead him to the palace. When Job lost everything, it looked like the end, but it was the setup for double restoration. When Jesus hung on the cross, it looked like defeat, but it was the greatest victory in history. What makes you think your story will end any differently? God specializes in turning pain into power, sorrow into strength, and brokenness into beauty. The thing that hurt you most will one day become the very thing that heals others. The enemy thought your pain would make you bitter, but instead it made you better. He thought you'd walk away from God, but instead you walked closer. He thought he could silence your praise, but instead your worship got louder. Every wound you carry is proof that you survived something that was designed to destroy you. And because you survived, there's a greater purpose on your life. The pain wasn't random, it was prophetic. It was the birthplace of your anointing, so don't curse your pain, bless it. Thank God for the lessons, the losses, and the late nights. They were all ingredients in your spiritual growth. You wouldn't have learned faith without the fight. You wouldn't have learned peace without the storm. You wouldn't have learned strength without the struggle. Every ounce of pain you endured was preparing you for the restoration that's coming. The greater the pain, the greater the purpose. The deeper the valley, the higher the mountain God is taking you to. Now you can stand and say, "It was good that I was afflicted, because it taught me to trust God." You can look back and see that the pain was never permanent. It was preparation. You didn't lose, you learned. You didn't fail, you were formed. And now, because of that pain, you carry a power and wisdom that no one can take from you. God is restoring the years you thought were wasted, and every tear that fell was a seed of your next blessing. What once broke you will now bless you, and what once hurt you will now help you heal others. Your pain was never wasted, it was the foundation for your purpose. There were moments when you looked around and saw nothing moving, nothing changing, nothing happening, and you wondered, "God, where are you?" It felt like heaven was silent, like your prayers were bouncing off the ceiling, and your hope was slowly fading. But here's the truth. Just because you couldn't see God moving doesn't mean He wasn't working. God does His greatest work in silence. When you were waiting, He was working. When you were doubting, He was designing. When you thought the delay meant denial, God was setting things up in divine order. What you thought was stagnation was actually preparation. He was aligning opportunities, shifting hearts, and clearing obstacles that you didn't even know existed. His timing is never late, it's strategic. Every delay carries divine purpose. Every silence hides sacred movement. You see, God doesn't need to announce what He's doing. He doesn't always show you the blueprint because He wants you to build in faith. If you could see the whole picture, you wouldn't need to trust Him. The silence wasn't abandonment, it was training. God was teaching you how to believe without evidence, how to stand without signs, how to trust when you can't trace Him. Every test in your waiting season was building spiritual muscles for your next level. The waiting didn't weaken you, it strengthened your discernment. It taught you to hear His whisper instead of needing His thunder. Think about Joseph after being sold into slavery and thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit. He could have thought God had forgotten him. But in the silence of that cell, God was shaping a leader who would save nations. Think about David, anointed to be king, yet sent back to tend sheep. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. In the quiet fields, David learned worship, warfare, and patience. God used obscurity to develop his obedience. So, if you're in a season where it feels like nothing's happening, don't be discouraged. Something is happening inside you. God is strengthening your faith, refining your heart, and preparing your spirit to carry the blessing that's on its way. You may not see it yet, but the silence is sacred. Heaven is busy even when the earth is still. The reason God hid His hand was because He was building your foundation. He knew if He gave you the promise too soon, you wouldn't have the maturity to sustain it. He's not just trying to get you to the blessing. He's preparing you to keep it once it comes. The silence wasn't rejection, it was protection. God kept certain doors closed because He knew they would have crushed you if they opened too early. He withheld certain relationships because they would have distracted you from your destiny. He let certain people walk away because they couldn't handle where He was taking you. In the silence, you learn to walk by faith and not by sight. You learn to depend on His presence rather than His proof. That's why some seasons feel quiet, because God is pulling you closer to hear His voice more clearly. He doesn't shout over noise, He speaks in stillness. The silence is His invitation for intimacy. He's saying, "Be still and know that I am God." When life gets quiet, it's not because you're alone, it's because God wants your full attention. So don't rush the silence, rest in it. Don't despise the waiting, develop in it. When God seems quiet, remember that silence often precedes the sound of breakthrough. Before the dawn breaks, there is always a moment of deep stillness. Before the resurrection, there was a tomb and 3 days of silence. Before the rain came, there was the sound of nothing, and then suddenly, abundance. Your silence is not a sign that God has forgotten you. It's proof that He's preparing something big behind the curtain of time. Every prayer you whispered in the dark has been heard. Every tear you cried in frustration has been counted. God has not been still, He's been strategic. The silence is His way of building your faith so that when the breakthrough comes, you'll recognize it was Him and not coincidence. Hold on through the quiet, your miracle is already in motion. The silence was never God's absence, it was His strategy for your strength. There comes a moment when everything that was taken, lost, or delayed begins to make sense, and you realize God never allowed it to leave your life to punish you. He allowed it to prepare you. Restoration isn't about simply giving you back what you lost. It's about returning it multiplied, refined, and better than before. When God restores, He doesn't return things in the same condition. He makes them new, stronger, and more valuable. You may have lost time, relationships, finances, or even opportunities, but God specializes in divine compensation. What took years to build, He can rebuild in days. What seemed permanently gone, He can breathe life into again. God's restoration is not recovery, it's redemption. It's Him saying, I'm not just going to bring you back to where you were, I'm going to take you beyond what you imagined. There are seasons when you thought your best days were behind you. You looked at your life and said, I wasted too much time, I made too many mistakes. But God says, I will restore the years the locusts have eaten. The years you thought were stolen by heartbreak, betrayal, and loss. God is redeeming them right now. You thought it was over, but it was only paused. You thought you were forgotten, but heaven never forgot your name. Every tear, every disappointment, every closed door was recorded in heaven, and now God is saying, I'm about to repay you for your pain. He's not just restoring what you lost, He's restoring the strength, faith, and favor you gained through the loss. Sometimes God allows certain things to fall apart because He's planning to rebuild them in His own design. You may have tried to fix it on your own, but God said, let it break, because I'm going to build something unshakable. The relationships that ended, the jobs that slipped away, the dreams that seemed to die, none of it was wasted. Every piece that fell apart will become part of your testimony. Restoration is not about going back, it's about rising higher. The pain was the soil, the tears were the water, and your faith was the seed, and now it's harvest time. When God restores, He also repositions. He doesn't just give back what was taken. He gives it back in a way that propels you into purpose. The people who left you made space for those who will value you. The doors that closed made room for divine doors that can never be shut. The job you lost is leading to a calling that brings fulfillment, not just income. Everything you thought you lost is returning in divine order, perfectly aligned with your destiny. God restores in ways that exceed logic, so when it happens, you'll know it was Him. Don't be surprised when you walk into blessings that feel like déjà vu moments where God reintroduces what you lost, but now with peace attached. That's how you'll know it's restoration. You'll realize that what you lost didn't break you, it built you. It taught you to pray harder, trust deeper, and believe longer. Restoration is not just about receiving back. It's about becoming more than who you were when you lost it. God will restore your joy, your dignity, your confidence, and your sense of purpose. So lift your head and expect restoration. Stop mourning over what was and start praising for what's coming. God doesn't need permission from your past to bless your future. The years that were lost are being repaid with acceleration. You're stepping into a season where what you thought was gone forever will return greater, stronger, and filled with glory. You'll soon see why it had to break, because what's being restored carries heaven's fingerprint. Your story isn't over. It's just entering its most powerful chapter. God is about to restore not just what you had, but the person you became through the fire. There comes a moment in your walk with God when you realize that everything you lost was never really lost. It was being repositioned for divine restoration. You see, when God restores, He doesn't just return what was taken, He upgrades it. He doesn't hand you back what was broken, He replaces it with something unshakable, something that reflects His glory. That's the beauty of divine restoration. It's never equal exchange, it's always divine increase. The very areas where you cried the most, where you were betrayed, where you felt overlooked, those are the exact areas where God is about to pour out His greatest blessings. Every tear was an investment, every disappointment was preparation, every no was leading you to His ultimate yes. Some of you thought your story was finished because of the pain you endured, but God says, I'm rewriting your story with restoration. You may have lost people, time, opportunities, and even confidence, but nothing is ever truly lost in the hands of God. The same God who raised the dead, who multiplied a few loaves and fish, who turned water into wine, that same miracle working God is about to multiply what you thought was gone. He's not just restoring your finances, your relationships, or your peace. He's restoring your identity. You will no longer see yourself as broken or behind. You will see yourself as chosen, redeemed, and strengthened. You see, divine restoration is not about returning to your old life, it's about walking into a better one. When God restores, He gives you back time, strength, and favor that were stolen by worry, fear, and heartbreak. He takes the ashes of your pain and shapes them into beauty. He turns your weakness into testimony. You won't just recover what was taken, you'll rise higher because of what was taken. And when people see you walk in new strength, they'll say, that has to be God. You might be wondering, how could God restore what I lost so long ago? But understand this God exists outside of time. What you call too late, He calls right on schedule. What looks like delay to you is simply divine timing aligning. He hasn't forgotten the seeds you sowed, the prayers you whispered in pain, or the faith you held on to when everything seemed dark. Those moments didn't go unnoticed, they went into your heavenly account, and now God is saying, it's payback season. Every stolen year, every sleepless night, every closed door is about to be redeemed in your favor. When God restores, He also protects. What He gives you this time will not be stolen again. The blessing will come with boundaries, the promotion will come with peace, and the relationship will come with divine alignment. This time it won't crumble under pressure because it's built on God's foundation, not yours. You've been through too much to go back to ordinary. This is your season to receive extraordinary restoration, the kind that doesn't just rebuild what was lost, but reveals who you truly are in Christ. So stand still and believe. You're not at the end of your story, you're standing at the beginning of your comeback. What you lost was just the seed. The harvest is on its way, and when it comes, it will make sense of every tear, every struggle, and every delay. God is about to restore the years the enemy tried to erase, and when He does, you'll realize this truth. You didn't lose, you were being positioned for a double portion. Your restoration won't just be seen, it will be undeniable. When God says, your comeback will be greater than your setback, He means every word. You didn't walk through that fire for nothing. You didn't cry those tears for nothing. You didn't endure the heartbreak, the betrayal, or the loss without divine purpose. Everything you faced was shaping you, molding you, and preparing you for what's next. God never wastes pain. Every wound you carry has a purpose behind it, and every valley you walked through is leading you toward a mountaintop moment. You see, your setback wasn't meant to destroy you, it was meant to refine you. It broke the parts of you that couldn't carry the next level of blessing. It purified your motives, deepened your faith, and reminded you who truly sustains you. There were moments you thought you were done, that you couldn't recover from what happened. The enemy whispered lies in your ear, saying, this is the end. But God was quietly saying, not yet, I'm not finished. He allowed you to be stripped down so that He could build you back stronger. You may have been overlooked, but you were never abandoned. You may have been delayed, but you were never denied. The same God who allowed the storm is the one who will command it to cease. And when it does, you'll see why it all had to happen the way it did. The pain wasn't punishment, it was preparation. God specializes in comebacks. When the world counted you out, He was counting down to your resurrection. Think about Job, he lost everything, but when God restored him, He gave him double for his trouble. Think about Joseph, betrayed, enslaved, and imprisoned, yet God used those very setbacks to position him in a palace. That's the kind of God you serve, one who turns your mess into miracles, your sorrow into success, your breakdown into breakthrough. You may have been crushed, but you are not destroyed. You may have been knocked down, but you are about to rise higher than ever before. Your comeback will not be quiet. It will be visible, undeniable, and overflowing with the glory of God. People who saw you fall will see you rise, and they won't be able to explain it. They'll wonder how you made it, but you'll know the truth. It wasn't your strength, it was God's hand. What's coming next will erase the memory of your pain. The joy will outweigh the tears, the abundance will overshadow the lack, and the peace will replace the confusion. God is not just restoring your situation, He's restoring your reputation, your confidence, and your faith. And when he brings you out, you won't even look like what you've been through. The scars will remain, but only as proof that grace carried you. You'll speak differently, walk differently, and think differently because the fire that tried to destroy you actually refined you. The blessing that's coming will not just bless you, it will bless everyone connected to you. Your comeback will inspire others to trust God through their own storms. So hold your head high, even if you're still in the ashes. God is not done with your story. The best chapters haven't even been written yet. You are about to see what divine restoration truly looks like. The very places where you experienced loss will become the stages of your victory. This is not the end, this is your beginning. Your comeback will silence every doubt, every lie, and every voice that said you couldn't make it. God is about to make your life living proof that no setback can stop a child of destiny. What's coming next will not just restore you, it will reward you. Stay faithful, stay ready, because your greater comeback is already in motion.